this project was sort of conceived with a couple of notions. Initially, I built a couple of townhouses next door, and I had a remaining portion of land here that had an old shed on it, and I was in the process of acquiring the land that was on there because half of it was on my property, half was off, and so on. So I couldn't do anything at the time. We went through the formalities of that, resolved all those things. And I remember when I finished that, it sort of started off, my dad said, what are you going to do with this portion of land? And I said, oh, I'm going to build a garage on it with a roof deck on there, and probably put a hot tub or something like that on there, and connect it to the existing deck off the townhouse adjacent. And he said, why don't you build an apartment on it? And he meant something else, which I found out later down the track when I actually started the construction of this a year and a half ago. But I thought about it, build an apartment on there. Oh, you can't do that. The staircases take up a lot of space and so on. And when I travelled with work with photography around the country and around the world, I stay in a lot of hotels and apartments and so on. And, I'll be in London, Paris, New York, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and they're tiny, tiny spaces. And it was quite comfortable to live in those spaces. And I really started paying attention to how I live in a space, how I use a space, and how I utilise the storage and sort of mould my life around that as well, and the mindset that you need to have. And I thought you could do it. And I started researching it, 6 years ago or so on now, and really, really looked at construction methods, tried to look at case studies of projects that have these small houses. And when I was building the other house as well, I started sort of engaging with sustainable building. And part of the photography work I do is architectural work, and I'm very interested in engineering, architecture, design. And I really paid attention to that. And it was very hard to find a case study that encapsulated everything. There were a lot of projects that did one or two elements or quite a few elements, but it wasn't the whole kit and caboodle. And when I researched more, the whole picture, I guess, is life cycle analysis, LCA, and looking at how you construct a building, how you occupy the building and consume in the building, and then also the recycling content. So it's looking at the whole picture, the whole cycle, looking at where the materials come from, how they're manufactured, the amount of energy used to actually manufacture that material. Because you could build something that is very, very low emissions in occupancy of the building, but if you destroy half the planet constructing that building, it's actually counterintuitive. And there's elements in buildings like Portland-based cement, and if you use a lot of that stuff, you could spend 200 years trying to just offset that to be carbon neutral again. So that began the research of whether it's really viable to do it and whether we have the technologies to do that as well. Another aspect I looked at was why some of the projects that I found weren't relevant any longer, and part of that was some of them used a lot of experimental technology or not commercially available product. So that was one of the other parameters I set for myself, is commercially available products. So that way it's accessible for people. I didn't want to build this thing and go through all this effort and keep it all to myself or try and commercialize it myself. If I did that, it'd take a lot longer and it end up not getting built. We wouldn't be here right now because it'd just take a lot longer to do that, and a lot more process involved with that. So I approached it from an open source point of view, sharing the information that I have, and that's the idea of this website. That's the idea of Going on Grand Designs, to get the information out there. That's part of this whole thing as well, because I think there's really three reasons why people will go green. One is, it doesn't affect their lifestyle too much. The second is it doesn't affect their hip pocket too much. And the third one is education. And when I say education, it's being informed. and being informed by the general public, general sort of media as well, and just having the right information out there. There's a lot of greenwashing out there and a lot of omission of the facts to suit, manufacturers' purposes, to try and promote their product and push their product. I don't begrudge them for it. All I'm doing is saying, well, this is what can be done, this is how it can be done, this is why we're justifying what we're doing, why we're using certain products, why we're using hardwoods, and how we can justify it. So it's all those aspects that we're trying to hit and aim to hit for this project to be a success as well. After researching, for a substantial amount of time, it came the point now to meet up with council was the first thing I did, and really wanted to sort of get their sort of response to what I was going to try and do. There was no point engaging an architect or looking for architects if it wasn't even going to be within the scope of reality for this to be built on this site in this tight sort of space. And then I started interviewing a lot of architects and some fantastic architects as well, all the really good architects that I could find locally as well. And I wanted to collaborate with them and work with them, and I ended up going with an architectural firm that was a design construct proposal, and we went down that path and started going through the process of, pulling a team together really to build this, to get, someone working on doing the embodied energy calculations, the mechanical engineering, the structural engineering, because all of these aspects were going to be pushed, and we needed people who were engaged and wanted and saw the vision of this project as a bit of an exemplar of what can be done. We finally pulled a team together, and really it's about what we can't do on the site. It's 5 metres by 4 metres of the footprint that we're trying to build on. The whole site's 5 by 5, relatively. We've got about 900 mil between two buildings, so it's what we can do on this site with the restrictions that we have. So we made a list, we had our objectives and so on, and it's been a sort of drawn out process with the planning application situation. Then also once we've got that, then the actual build component, the engineering of it, working in within the restrictions of what materials we can and can't use, trying to reduce the embodied energy in the building, dictated what materials we used as well. And there was a lot of work done by the team with the architect, with the consultants from Melbourne University and so on that were doing the embodied calculations. Decisions were made. As we processed all that, we got to this final stage, and then there was the cost, which was always a concern, and that had kind of blown out as well. And the project was pretty much stalled. And when it was stalled, I don't know whether anyone else knew that, but basically I couldn't come up with 80% more than the original budget, or plus that really on it. So I really had to reassess how I was going to do things, and part of that was then me taking on the construction part, which wasn't part of the intention at the start. I was going to project manage it, and I was doing that to this point, but I had to sort of take control, otherwise it just ended up being another plan draw, which was a great idea. Simplified the plans and then went through this process of finding suppliers and so on to actually get this to fruition, and get it built. The first step, I guess, physically after going through all that process on site was the demolition of the shed that was here, and that would have been a year and 19 days prior to the completion of the job. So I think we did pretty well. I wanted the job to, run into 6 to 8 months sort of period. We lost 2 months effectively over Christmas at least, and then there's Easter and so on. So realistically, if you take 2.5 to 3 months off that 12-month period, it's a 9-month build, which isn't bad for the amount of detail on this job. And then also the building methods and so on that we used, and the level of skills required in that was very different to a standard building. Getting the building airtight just about made me have a nervous breakdown. And, you know, that part of it, and to that level on everything from to electrical to ventilation systems and running the ducting and all those sort of things and tying all that stuff together, was a major sort of achievement, I guess, to do in that time frame, and effectively a prototype sort of building, a one-off. Looking back now, I think it's a hell of an achievement to do it in that period of time. And it's not just me, it's basically everyone involved, and people that really stuck it out as well in this project, because it really did push everyone. So I think people that are standing at the end really need to pat themselves on the back for it. Even though this building is 5 metres by 4 metres, it really has a lot of detail to it. The footings, the foundations are really the anchor to this building. We've got a 1.5 tonne hot tub 10 metres up in the air, and the majority of this building is timber, so there's steel through it, but they're tie rods and so on, so it's minimal steel that's required there. So the footings look reasonably substantial. We use board piers in there, again, to control the amount of waste coming off site and so on. So everything's been considered to use the minimum amount required to achieve its goal. And I think to encapsulate this whole build, it's about the considerations and considering every aspect of it, not just one aspect of saying, well, we need a sturdy structure, so our foundation, so we just pump a whole lot of concrete in. The type of concrete we used as well was a geopolymer concrete, which had low embodied energy. 1/10 of the embodied energy is Portland-based cement. So the cement component is the one with the most embodied energy in it. We used a geopolymer binding agent instead of Portland cement. So there's a lot of these little details through the whole project that were considered and specifically used. Everything has been considered in this project, down to the hand washers that we use through the job. We use renewable power, renewable electricity through the whole process as well. So we're carbon neutral on power to site. When we use machinery, we try to use a lot of hybrid machinery where we didn't even use generators. We charged them overnight off the renewable power and then ran them off their batteries during the day. So it's really considering every part of the build. Even when we demolished the shed, I used a hauling company for the demolition part of it that recycled everything. So they took it back to their yard, spread all the stuff out, and actually recycled the waste. So everything that was taken off site is being recycled somewhere. When it came to actually constructing the building, getting the timber component up above that first above the ground level, you know, I allowed 2 days for it to do that, and a hell of a lot of planning went into that to bring it down to 2 days. It was a logistical sort of nightmare because there were a lot of elements involved, down to the wind on the day because we were craning stuff on site. It actually went 2 months prior to that. While all the groundwork was being done, we simplified the structural elements in there as well. So we worked backwards from how we were going to lift it. We actually reduced the amount of volume of the pieces so we could actually lift the pieces up, and then worked out the sequence of how we were going to build that as well, and allowed for time in between to shore up each level as we built up. So that was done with the manufacturer of the floor cassettes and collaboration with them, and went back to the engineer and got things signed off on that we had sort of minimised and just ticked off. Actually, if anything, it added to the structural integrity. How we redesigned the actual construction of some of the elements. So we had the theory of how we're going to put it together. It had been considered, even down to the points that we're going to use to pick up the elements, where we were going to put the nuts and bolts to actually lift the elements, and whether those could take the load while they're being lifted over and lifted into place. So we had a semi-trailer come down the laneway without a load to make sure we could get it down there and we wouldn't have any issues on the day. We had the crane come down prior to getting in position to actually shoot a week or two before, to make sure we eliminated all the issues we might have actually getting that crane into position. I coordinated with the neighbours to get panels taken off fences and so on. There were some owners that were overseas, so I was coordinating with people in London and so on. I kept the immediate neighbours very involved with it, and I think they were quite excited about it as well. So it came to the day we started lifting. It was hectic. That first element that had to go on really kicked our butts and took probably about 2.5 hours longer than what I'd allowed for, what I'd expected. And then the rest of it fought us a little bit on the way up, but overall we got the whole structure up in 2.5 days. And I've got still images which have been time dated, at 1:42 or something in the afternoon on the third day. We put that last element on. So, the first day was a long day. It was a 10-hour day or something like that. And second day, and then the third day, we finished everything. The day after the whole structure was up, we had all the scaffolding up. So the building was wrapped up again. We didn't see it, and then we had to start working on putting all the internal structural elements in, shoring up that building, tying everything down, and then led into the whole process of the build. So that was a major, major step there. At the end of that third day, to really stand back and say, "Wow, we've got the structure, we've got the height of this building, we've got the sort of space of the building as well now." So it was very exciting going through that, but there was a hell of a job still left to do. So I couldn't sort of relax after that. Once we got the structure of the building up and the framing was signed off on, the engineering part of it, everything bolted down, that was the rigid part of the build that we had to stick by exactly how it was signed off from the engineering drawings. We've got that together, and now it's doing the inside and the detailing and the connections and so on internally. That's now become a little bit more fluid, or when I say fluid, it's more about logic and deciding how we're going to do it. So I guess I didn't spend a lot. Well, we had plans and guides, but there were a lot of areas that weren't detailed in there. Getting the building airtight was a hard part that wasn't detailed. And I think, looking back, I think that's something that we need to do if we ever did something like this again, or if it's going to be done again. That part really needs to get buttoned down right at that very early stage, because that affects how efficiently you can actually get the building airtight, and that is the key to this building, because if the building's not airtight, we're wasting money on airtight windows and double and triple glazing, or really insulating it, because if the building leaks, you're getting cold air inconsistently. So we've gone through we went through the process of getting all those elements in, the phase change material and the insulation in, and then wrapping it up and getting it airtight, and then putting the cladding and everything on. So a lot of that stuff hadn't been done before by the majority of the trades on site. So I was on the tools. I was on there working out the solutions as we went along. And I think that needed to happen, because otherwise it would have delayed the job as well. And I took on the job of being the builder, knowing that that was going to be the case. there was nothing to follow that was documented really, other than manufacturers' instructions. But some of those, that's as a principle of how you do it, but it's not necessarily applicable to the site itself. That's very site specific. So, so that was a hard part, I think, of the project. And then going back in and sitting down doing the paperwork at the end of the day and ordering things and making sure things are sequenced and coming on time. We don't have a lot of space on or around this site, so we couldn't have stuff delivered and sitting on site because they'd get in the way. So as we went through this process as well, in the overall construction side of things, sequencing was very, very important. We had to do things a couple of times sometimes because it was physically impossible to do it in a standard sequence that you'd normally build. So it was a real process, I guess, to get there. This building has a lot of timber, and the reason we have a lot of timber is the lower embodied energy in it and all the benefits of building with that for the overall life cycle of the building. I wasn't concerned, but I was concerned if we didn't pay attention to it, it could end up looking like a very beige building inside. So I was really considering, and I really considered how we finish off that building, and I worked with a great interior designer that I worked with prior to talk about that and the colours that we're going to use to the treads on the stairs to the floors, because there's effectively two timbers that we've used through this whole thing, plywood and hardwood. The hardwood, before anyone jumps down my throat and says, oh, you're using hardwoods, you're cutting down trees, the hardwood we've actually used is timber that has been glue laminated together, and they've been glued together in finger joins and then laminated together as well. So structurally, for the big beams and so on, they're very strong and they're very stable, and we've used that same timber that for the floorboards, for the cladding on the outside, for the mullions, for the bench tops in here as well. It's all the same timber. So I wanted to differentiate between the timber. We've used it in the window elements. That timber's never been used for that purpose before, that application before, and it's come up beautifully. You know, the timber manufacturer is unbelievable, to the point where the actual people from the mill were surprised how well it's come up, and it's another application that it can be used in. The flooring's great as well. So what we did was we wire brushed the floors. We stained them in a slightly different colour. The stains we used are a natural stain. The waxes we've used to seal the timbers are a natural product as well to reduce, you know, the effect. I've been in here for 3 weeks and it doesn't smell like a new house. We've used zero VOC paints in here. So everything, like I said, has been considered. And I think as a cumulative result, I think, you know, it's fantastic. I'm really happy with it, and I've had a fantastic response from everyone that sort of comes in here as well and is surprised at how spacious it looks, because those little theories of having floor-to-ceiling glass, having glass balustrades adds to the space, having gaps between the stairs adds to the space, adds for the lightness of it. You know, furniture, custom furniture made that doubles up from a couch to a dining table, TV that recesses back into the cabinetry with the pop-up mechanism. So you have these obstructed views out, but then when you want to watch TV, it can come up into a line of sight. So it's keeping things simple as well, and clean and finished is a major part and major element to supporting the whole sense of space in here, and light as well. If there's a next time, and that'll be purely an opportunistic thing if the right opportunity comes up to do something, I think I'd be a little bit more hands-on in the actual design stage and work with the team a lot more on it, to basically control the cost side of it, because I think going back, this project nearly fell over because of that cost factor. And yes, I found a way of getting it done by getting support from project partners and teaming up with people and so on. But it could have gone the other way as well if I wasn't involved as much as I would later on. And I think to, I guess, reduce that that possibility of things going wrong, I would have had to be involved a lot more at the start.
So would you do it again?
I'd like to. I'd be happy to. I think it's at what capacity and what team is involved, I think would really solidify that decision whether I do it or not. Over the last 3 or so weeks that I've been in here, it's felt fantastic. Everything, all my little theories have worked. The odd thing about it, probably because I spent so much time in here, I would have been, well, right from the demolition of the shed to moving in here, to being in here, I would be spending a minimum of 5 to 8 hours a day in here, minimum. I was living next door, but I'd be over here working and measuring things out and so on. But as soon as the construction started, I was here on the tools from 7 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock, or even longer sometimes, and then in the office next door ordering things. So, as it got closer to the end and things slowed down with the finishes and so on, I was in here all the time. It felt like I was in here, but being in here relaxing, lying down watching TV, or making coffee in the morning, it feels comfortable. It feels like I have space. I've had a couple of people in here when we're sitting down having drinks in the evening and so on, and it doesn't feel overcrowded. Yes, it is a little bit different. Only 2 people, sort of 3 people fit on the couch, and then you're sitting around these little stools. But you go to a trendy little bar these days in Fitzroy, and it's the same thing. The thing that didn't work, that hasn't worked, and I think that's something that I need to change in my lifestyle, I guess, is hanging space. There's a fairly restricted hanging space in here, and I've pondered where I'm going to hang jackets and so on, and it's now changing. I might have a coat rack downstairs that has 3 or 4 jackets on there that I'm wearing during the week, but the rest of them I might have to lay out in the big storage sort of drawers that I have under the bed, and then rotate through those. It's just changing your lifestyle a little bit. That's been the biggest I guess aspect that I guess I didn't consider enough at the start. Positive side of it, again, I've been using that hot tub 3-4 times a week, and it's quite funny. I'll be out at dinner or something like that, and it'll start to rain. It's getting really, really cold, and I actually look forward to coming home and sitting in the hot tub. So livability on here is fantastic. The space up the top there around the hot tub in the middle of winter, and it was 3 degrees the other night or less, and I was in the hot tub that night, or other mornings I've woken up really early and I've jumped in the hot tub for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. It's 39 degrees in there. It's been heated with the geothermal heating, and while I'm heating the hot tub, I'm getting domestic hot water boosted, and while the heating system's working as well, it's heating the tank that's used to heat the hot tub. So it's a very efficient system so far. I think overall as well, there's a lot of things that are going to have to be assessed as far as those systems with the consumption and so on, to work out how efficiently they're working. I haven't got my power bill yet, but the lights in here, I think overall there's less than 300-400 watts of lights in total, and that's probably an over-exaggerated figure. I haven't actually calculated the overall lights in here. So it'll be good to see, what happens in the next 5-6 months, and that is something that I'm going to be sharing the information as well on.